Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from my bed where I watched the Lakers-Wizards game. I am here in New York ahead of Lakers-Knicks and Lakers-Nets. My brother lives out here, so I'm spending the week hanging out with him and enjoying this nice New York weather. It's between 5 and 15 degrees basically the entire time I'm here. But Lakers won 142 to 111, nearly setting a season high in points, setting season highs in field goal percentage and assists. They shot 61% from the floor. They had 38 assists, eclipsing their season high of 36 against Atlanta. Luka Doncic became still the first player, but did it for a second time, player in NBA history to have a 25-plus point triple-double in a half. So he posted that in the first half. And just a wire-to-wire domination for the Lakers, who improved to 29-18, jump back up from number 6 to number 5 in the West. They are also now 4-2 on their 8-game Grammy road trip. And this is what good teams are supposed to do when you play a bad team. Washington entered as arguably the worst or second worst team in the NBA, second worst defense, just not a good basketball team. And this is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to have a close game. You're not supposed to have a game that goes into the clutch. You have a game where you are winning by 38 points in the third quarter. You're up by around 30 for most of the fourth quarter. Luka Doncic doesn't have to play in the fourth quarter, which is not something we have been able to say at all this season. That might have been the first time he rested an entire fourth quarter off the top of my head. I feel like even in some of the Lakers' other blowouts that he's played in, he's had to play at least a little bit in the fourth. So Lakers have their version of an OKC blowout where they get to rest at least Luka, LeBron, and some of the other DA, Vando, Rui, some of those guys played into the fourth. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang, and let's get into the game. So I don't want to focus too much on this game because the analysis is simple. The Lakers played a bad team. They beat them in a manner that they should. I think it is worth noting Washington only had 4 30-point losses going into tonight. So the Lakers joined that club, and I think technically Boston beat them twice by 30-plus. So the Wizards are bad, and they've been blown out a lot. They've lost a lot of games by 20-plus, but the 30-plus, that is a rare class. And again, for a Lakers team that does not have a lot of blowout wins this season, this was actually LA's first 30-plus point win, first 30-plus margin of victory this season. Their previous high was 25. Nice win from that perspective, right? Obviously, I don't think we learned necessarily anything from this game. But my big picture takeaway from this is just, again, wire-to-wire domination, which to me has been something the Lakers have struggled with. And even if we think about some of their other big wins, with the exception of the Sacramento game where they beat the Kings by 24, you think about that Atlanta game. Atlanta went on a huge run to close the third into the fourth. It got a little shaky there, right? It was around, I believe, 11, 12 points for a little bit, and then LA was able to once again hit them with another haymaker in the fourth and stretch that lead out and end up winning that one by 25. You think about the Milwaukee game, there was a couple times Milwaukee was able to get it to around 10, 11 points. So this was the first just straight up wire to wire, LA dominates every minute of this game. Yes, they were technically outscored in the third quarter, 36-31, 25-11 over the final 7 minutes, but they were up by 38 at that point. It's natural to take your foot off the gas to a degree. I think it's different doing that when you're up 38 versus when you're up 18, which is what we've seen from LA a lot. They'll go up 15, 18, 20 to some of these bad teams. They take their foot off the gas. Then that 25-11 run is making it an actual game, because if you're up 18, you get outscored by 14, all of a sudden it's a 4-point game. So, but it's different when you're doing that when you're up by 38. So there was some of that for those who want to nitpick or criticize LA's focus and complete buy-in. It was not a 48-minute performance, but it was pretty much a 41, 42-minute performance. And I was actually really impressed with the third string guys, the garbage time guys actually winning their minutes. And that has been something that they have done like up and down this season. And it could have easily gotten like JJ does not trust the bench, as we see, right? With the LeBron, DA, Timmy, Vando and Marcus group playing as long as it did in the fourth quarter. They eventually subbed in Gabe, and then they eventually subbed in Jake to replace Gabe. But like JJ just in general does not trust the bench to keep leads. And I don't blame him, because the Lakers 11 to 14 on the roster is pretty rough compared to most rosters, even lottery rosters. A lot of those lottery teams have better back end talent on their roster. So I understand where JJ's coming from with that, but that group was able to hold its own and actually win its minutes tonight. So I thought that was like another small encouraging sign. But again, mentioned it at the top, season high, 61% field goal percentage, 38 assists, also a season high, 66 points in the paint, 17 steals, 26 fast break points. Just like this is what some team, like this is kind of what Cleveland did to LA in the second half. This is what some of the better teams have done to LA at times, where they just physically overwhelm them and just look like they should not be on the same court as them. That's how tonight went, in terms of Washington was just getting destroyed on both sides of the ball. So don't want to read too much into it beyond that. In terms of notable performers, we have to start with Luka Doncic, who, as I mentioned, had 26 points. They said 11 rebounds, then they took away a rebound, but still had the triple-double in the first half. So 26 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists in the first half. Ends up with 37 points, 11 rebounds, 13 assists, 3 steals, 5 turnovers, 13 to 21 shooting, 6 for 13 on threes. So some quick math there. 7 for 8 inside the arc. One of the big developments recently with Luka, especially on this trip, has been he had not been shooting the ball as well from 2-point range, but that's been back to 68% on this trip going into tonight. That's obviously going to go up after tonight, should be above 70%. I want to focus on Luka with one of my takeaways, so I don't want to go too much into his performance beyond that, but another incredible Luka game. He entered tonight on the trip averaging 36 points, 9 rebounds, 10 assists on 50, I want to say 54, 39, 76 shooting splits, if I'm not mistaken. He might even be high 50s, but somewhere in mid to high 50s, 39% on threes, 76% on free throws. He just added to that tonight with the 13 for 21 shooting, 6 for 13 on threes. Like just incredible play from Luka right now. And he belongs in the MVP discussion. I think it really is just going to come down to where LA falls in the standings. If they're 5 or 6 seed, I don't think he has a real shot to win it. I think they have to be in that top 4 and potentially even in that top 3. His numbers are going to be there, right? It's just a matter, if LA is the 6th seed, it's hard to justify that over Shea potentially as the 1 seed, or Jokic, who just returned tonight and can miss one more game without losing his eligibility. If Denver's like the 2 or 3 seed, Lakers are the 6th seed, that's like the one way it's pretty tough to justify Luka winning. But he's playing MVP basketball right now. He's, I would say, probably been the best player in the world the last couple of weeks. Like, this has been great stuff from Luka. Then LeBron, 20 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 3 turnovers. Had an interesting game because he went, the jumper was falling for LeBron tonight, hit a couple threes. Also, the Lakers are spamming post actions with LeBron, and he was dissecting the Wizards defense. They eventually had to double him, and it was basically every possession he got the ball in the post, they were sending doubles at him. And he was able to make the right reads out of that, or have hockey assists where, it's the swing to the weak side. But he had a really interesting game because he only went 3 for 8 at the rim, which we know LeBron is one of the best finishers of all time. I think you could argue the best non-big man finisher of all time. And just tonight, for whatever reason, got blocked and missed a couple layups. But outside of that, I mean, he hit the few jumpers that he took inside the arc. hit a couple threes, and didn't have to do too much offensively because, I mean, it was second on the team in assists, but like didn't have to carry too much of a load tonight because DA really stepped up. But just this was a collective effort for LA. If you look at it, every player who played had at least 3 points, with Marcus and Jake coming in at just 3 points. But the entire bench, everybody had at least 4 points. So you saw Maxi Kleba score a couple buckets late. The crowd was, or I mean, not the crowd. The bench was going crazy. The crowd was going crazy for Bronny, who got the steal, the breakaway dunk. Also ended up getting to the free throw line, hitting a couple free throws. So just an all-around offensive effort from LA. But again, LeBron, like this was not one of the games where they needed too much from him just because of, frankly, the opponent. Jake and Marcus did Jake and Marcus things defensively. Jake had 3 steals and a block, 6 rebounds. Marcus had 4 assists and 4 turnovers. A little bit too much Marcus tonight at times, but only took a couple shots. I think there's a balance there with Marcus where sometimes he can have these games where he's not as involved in terms of shooting. Like, you want him taking some shots. You don't want him taking too many shots, but I mean, I thought Marcus was solid tonight and played good defense. And like really the starters dominated. If you look at, sometimes the plus minus tells the story, sometimes it doesn't. Tonight it did. Every starter was plus 21. The only other bench player who was a double digit positive was Drew Timme, because he was part of those groups with DA and LeBron and Vando that did so well. So yeah, I mean, the starters just crushed their minutes tonight in the first and third quarter. Then DA, I mean, 28 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 12 for 14 shooting, 4 for 4 on free throws. Definitely his best game since the Toronto game. I led the team in plus minus, plus 30. So he was out there for the starting minutes, but he was also out there for those LeBron-led bench minutes that have been defending really well, playing some zone, and really leveraging their physicality. Really nice game from DA. I have no critiques or qualms with it. Really, the only thing would just be this was the second worst defense in the league, bottom 3 team at best, if not arguably the worst team in the league. So it does continue to play into the general trend of him performing well against bad defenses and bad teams, and not performing as well against good teams when you look at a lot of the recent matchups against good teams. But they have another opportunity, or he has another opportunity to push back against that on Sunday against New York, and we'll see how he performs against Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, and the Knicks, who have been one of the best home teams in the league. Off the bench, Rui came in 11 points, hit a couple threes, got to the free throw line. Vando, I thought the defense was incredible again tonight. Had 8 points, hit a 3, had 4 steals, multiple deflections, was everywhere. Had a couple offensive rebounds. I mentioned Maxi hit a couple. Had the dunk and then hit a little runner late. Drew Timme has sort of settled into, I think, a more realistic role where they're not running post-ups necessarily or ISOs for him the way that they were against like Toronto and Denver. I would argue you could do that, and the Lakers have oddly gone away from the Timme minutes. Like, the new rotation is they'll close, sometimes they'll close with Luka. They'll bring Luka back in if they have like an offensive possession or just like the final minute of the first. Otherwise, they go with Rui in the Timme spot. Then they open the second with Rui in the Timme spot. Then they'll sub Timme in like 3 minutes into the second quarter. But then they're also sometimes subbing in Jake or they're subbing in Jake shortly after. And I just felt like they found something with that group of DA, Timme, LeBron, Vando, and Marcus. It had a couple, 4 shifts against Toronto and Denver. It crushed, I think, at least 3 of the 4. And then they just went away from it. Doesn't really make sense to me. And again, tonight, like, they dominated the Timme minutes, which was not just all crunch time. Like garbage time. He played 17 minutes, and looking at Maxi, Dalton, Bronny, those guys played 5 minutes. So Timme was out there for that, but you take that away. He played 12 minutes of actual game play, and the garbage time guys won their minutes by 4. So Timme was a plus. Lakers were plus 13 in Timme's 12 minutes. Like, they continue to win those minutes. I just don't really know why JJ went away from them. Gabe hit 1 shot in I would say like the competitive not the competitive portion of the game, but like the normal rotation portion of the game. Hit another shot in garbage time. Continues to be targeted defensively. Keyshawn George was targeting him. Other guys were targeting him. Still think the Lakers need to address that position via trade, but Jackson actually ended up. Jackson and Rui were the only two players who had a negative plus minus tonight. I thought Jackson was like fine. He had 10 points. He had several lobs. I actually liked his energy offensively, but Lakers rolled with DA because DA had it going tonight. And I thought that was the right move. With DA getting benched multiple times in second halves here recently on a night when he's playing with the verve and the spirit that you want to see, feed into that, right? So I thought Jackson was more so just a circumstance of how DA was playing and LA really leaning into that. And then, I mentioned Bronny, Dalton had a nice cut that he got fouled on, also had a nice drive and did have a steal. And that was pretty much the entire team. In terms of stat of the night, I already mentioned it, but 38 assists. Like the Lakers had over 20 assists in the first half. I think they might have had over 25, which just like that's been the golden number for them in terms of they're really tough to beat when they're above 25 assists. To hit 38, obviously, that you see the result. And it's not just the offensive end. It's, JJ's talked about this, but it's actually more so the defensive end. When the ball is moving and guys feel involved, they are trying harder defensively. And I thought tonight epitomized that. Of course, like, they didn't need to necessarily try tonight as hard as like they were supposed to against Cleveland, right? You could get away with more against an opponent like Washington, but still, I thought there was the right disposition from this group tonight, and they took care of business. Takeaway number one for me is another Luka masterclass. And I mean, Luka's just playing incredible basketball right now. So I mentioned it, like going into tonight on the road trip, averaging 36, 9, and 10 on 50. I want to say 54%, if I'm not mistaken, but 54% from the floor, 39% on threes, and 76% on free throws. He has been in a groove lately. I think that the 3-point shot has obviously come around. At the time it started to come around, he started to dip from 2-point percentage, but now that has corrected, and he's just playing as efficient basketball as he's played this season, I would argue, as a Laker. And he's consistently now, again, if you're shooting basically 65+% on twos and nearly 40% on threes, I mean, that's as efficient as it gets for a high volume scorer. So Luka, like, I think he's just pushing all the right buttons offensively in terms of, like, tonight, he had 8 assists in the first quarter. No, 7 assists in the first quarter. He had, I believe, 16, 7, and 7. And most of those were just feeding DA and Jackson, right? Those guys combined for 14 points on 7 field goals. And I want to say at least 5 or 6 of those were directly off of Luka feeds. So I think he's done a nice job involving the bigs, but then he's also done a nice job of, the skip passes to the corner. I mean, that the play of the night to me, like, so he has the bank in 3 from the left wing, which was obviously great, but that wraparound no look pass to Vando, which was one of Vando's buckets at the rim. I mean, that was just a remarkable pass where he threw. I mean, he was facing a double and basically looks away, which forces one of the defenders to start rotating, and with that gap there, just throws the wraparound and hits Vando with like a play that I just don't think many players can make. So I think Luka, again, last couple of weeks has been playing at best player in the world, at a best player in the world level. I think defensively, he's also been consistently engaged, and the 3 steals tonight, but like, I think he's been holding up better in isolations and switches and teams trying to pick on him. I don't think has been going as well as maybe it was earlier in the season, or certainly going back to like December. So I just think like the turn of the new year, into the month of January, I think January has largely been a great month for Luka. And after there's a lot of conversation about in the discourse of, is Luka still a top 5 guy? Or I've seen some people saying Luka's not a top 10 guy. Like, people were talking crazy. And I think this has been a reminder of how special Luka is. And just really, there's no one that can do what he does offensively in the league, right? And I think right now that there's a top 3 of Luka and Shea and Jokic, and you could argue in each player's case that no one could do what they're doing specifically. Like, the volume and efficiency that Shea is scoring at is special, right? And Jokic, top 3 in points, rebounds, and assists, averaging a triple-double. Denver has been basically right there with OKC in terms of their dominance when he's been on the floor. Like, that is special. And, many people would argue he's still the best player in the league. He just returned tonight. And then Luka, like, just, he's leading the league in scoring, top 3 in assists. Like, he's special in his own right. So I just think it's sort of like, almost reminds me of Pokemon. When you're starting out, you got to make your decision on which Pokemon you want to start with and who you want to build around. And I think you can make a case for any of those 3 guys in terms of like who you'd want to try to build a contender around right now. Takeaway number 2 and takeaway number 3, I'm going to rattle through relatively quickly. Takeaway number 2 is just Austin Reaves injury update. So Austin Reaves was upgraded to questionable, then was downgraded to out right before the game. JJ said no setback with Austin, that he just hit the 5-week mark with the injury, that he's actually ahead of schedule, not behind schedule or at schedule, and that they're just being cautious with this. They do not want to rush him back. You saw with Denver and Aaron Gordon, he just had a setback with his hamstring, and it's fair to wonder if he returned a little bit too soon. We have seen guys return from soft tissue in lower body injuries a little too soon. And when it's something that can be re-aggravated, and especially the calf right now is like the injury across the NBA, you don't want to mess with that. So yes, it would be great to have Austin come back Sunday against New York, and it does seem like that's a real possibility. But if it doesn't happen and this continues to linger into potentially next week or even later in the week, like, I think ultimately I want to err on the side of like being cautious with this one, because the Lakers do need Austin back. It's been a huge absence for them, but you do not want to rush this and have him re-injure it or make it potentially worse, right? So that's something you don't want to play with. You don't want to play with a calf. Then takeaway number 3, just want to state, like, I talked about this a little bit last show, but I want to go on the record for those who listen on Lakers Collective. I think you know how I feel about this already, but I want to state that I am against the Lakers potentially trading for DeAndre Hunter. Now, there's a lot with this whole situation because I'm skeptical of it for a variety of reasons. Number 1, all of the reporting that has been coming out has been from the Cleveland side. So anytime, like, there was the only reporting that has come out from the Lakers side has been from Brad Turner of the LA Times, who reported 6 names that he's heard in conversations be linked to the Lakers, and one of them was DeAndre Hunter. So that's the extent of that. It was not even in regard to a potential Lakers-Cavs trade or sort of this framework with Rui and Dalton for DeAndre Hunter. So a lot of the buzz and noise has been coming from the Cleveland side, which my read on that is like Cleveland is the one leaking this or pushing this, and they're the ones trying to make this happen. Now, again, like it could certainly happen, and maybe that's just like the way things have played out here, but that has my antenna raised a bit. I would say as like a follow-up to that, this is not really how Lakers trades happen. So if you think about most of the Lakers trades over the last few years, there will be like a little buzz maybe before, like I think it was clear at the 2023 deadline, Russ was going to be traded. It was just a matter of what was the framework of that trade. And we had reported at The Athletic that Utah was one of the teams we were hearing as a potential third team to take on Russ, but it was unclear who that other team is going to be. That ended up being Minnesota. So there'll be like things like that, or like DFS in the 24 hours or so. There was like a little bit of buzz about that, and it was clear like he was available. It was advancing with the Grizzlies, but it had not come out really that there was buzz with the Lakers. So this is not really how the Lakers operate. Lakers trades don't leak, and I just feel like this has been a little messy to the point of I'm a bit skeptical of this being, I don't want to say a real thing, because it's been reported out enough that I think it's like real to a degree. I'm just a bit skeptical of it actually happening. And then we just get into the actual bones of the trade itself. And I made this point on Lakers Collective. I still don't think we have the full picture with the trade, because it's not a legal 2-for-1 trade. You would have to incorporate a third team. And then there's the whole notion of who's getting potentially rerouted to the third team. What assets are the Lakers getting? Because I think they should be getting at least something for taking on. Like, if you just think about it from the perspective of, they're doing the Cavs a favor here of, even if you want to argue DeAndre Hunter is the better player, the Lakers are taking on $25 million, 24.9 to be exact, of salary for next season, and helping Cleveland's financial situation, and certainly helping them next season. And they'd be giving them Rui, who's a comparable player to DeAndre Hunter. So Cleveland gets to get money off the books for next year and basically just plug Rui into that Hunter spot off the bench. Then they're also getting Dalton Connect and taking a low stakes gamble on him and seeing what they could potentially extract out of him as a prospect. So I think the Lakers would have to get at least like a second or a couple seconds from Cleveland. And that's before even mentioning a third team and what would happen in that. And then if the Lakers were to do that, they could obviously reroute that and maybe go after a Keon Ellis or Sadiq Bey or whoever with 2 to 3 seconds and see what they could get for that. But that's like the optimistic view with this trade. The more I've dug into it, the more I've been watching a lot of DeAndre Hunter film on Synergy. I just don't see it. I don't really get it. I think between like he and Rui are pretty similar in terms of their general strengths and weaknesses. Like, both players are offensive minded. Both players are limited defenders, though asked to carry a higher defensive role than they should on their respective teams. Both are subpar rebounders for wings. Both, I think, can sometimes struggle with like their basketball IQ and processing. So like a lot of the motor can be an issue for both players. So it's like a lot of the criticisms of Rui apply to DeAndre Hunter, except DeAndre Hunter is making almost $7 million more and also on the books for next season at a contract rate that I fairly confident is more than Rui is going to be getting. I do not see Rui getting a $25 million contract, starting out average annual value. So it's like the Lakers are basically trading for, again, depending on how you want to frame it, could be a slightly better player, could basically be an equal player. Most advanced metrics have DeAndre Hunter slightly ahead of Rui. He does rate out better defensively. But again, we're talking like very tiny margins here, and not to the tune of being worth $7 million or so more than him. So I just think from the Lakers' perspective, adding a DeAndre Hunter at almost $25 million on next season's books, that cuts half of your projected cap space. So Lakers right now are projected to have around $50 million in cap space, depending on how things play out. You add DeAndre Hunter onto the books, that's cutting that in half. And I just don't, for the makeup of this group and ultimately the makeup of a potential Luka Austin backcourt, I don't think DeAndre Hunter is good enough to be a starter with that group. I don't think he's a good enough shooter, and I don't think he's a good enough defender. And at least with Rui, you could make the offensive argument. You could say he's a good enough shooter. He's just clearly not a good enough defender. With DeAndre Hunter, you can't really make the argument either way. I just think he's a slightly better rebounder. He's a slightly better passer. He's a slightly better defender. okay. Then they're similar in terms of their finishing. They're similar in terms of their mid-range shooting. DeAndre Hunter has a better like runner / floater. He's better in that like 3 to 10 foot range. Rui is has a better long mid-range jumper, better from like 16 to 23 feet. Then of course, Rui's a much better 3-point shooter. Even if you take DeAndre Hunter's career numbers, because this year he's having a career worst season from 3, Rui's a better shooter. So again, like if you want to argue, I do think there is something to like DeAndre, I think is more of a 3. Like I would say, in my opinion, Rui is a straight up 4, who the Lakers have forced sometimes to play 3. DeAndre Hunter's probably a 3.5. He's like a little bit too big and slow to play the 3 full time, but he can play the 3. And I think he's a more like Rui's better against bigger players. DeAndre Hunter's better against smaller players. So like there's maybe something there a little bit with the fit from that perspective. Again, I think he's a little bit more dynamic than Rui. He has a better handle. They run pick and rolls with him. He can create a little bit for himself or his teammates off the dribble, but he's not shooting like the things you want from him are he's not an average defender. I think he's a below average defender, and he's obviously having a terrible shooting season, which is like the primary skill offensively you want around the Lakers stars. So I'm out on the deal. I think it would be a mistake from LA. For what it's worth, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's had enough buzz that I wanted to break it down and talk about it with you guys, because I think this would be a mistake. And like, even if he is a better fit, let's just make the argument. If you want to say he's a slightly better player, slightly better fit, okay, but not at the opportunity cost of that $25 million next year. And that's really kicking the can to 2027 then, and potentially having like another transition year or another year where not everybody, like you haven't established your core, and now you're looking at 2027, which I think would be a mistake. So like if it's Gabe and Maxey, that's a totally different conversation, because you are really upgrading the rotation this season, and I'm a little bit more open to it. But again, when I keep thinking about the $25 million on the books next season, I just think that's frankly a bad contract, a bad value. You guys know, like when I like to think about contracts in terms of, if a player was hitting free agency this summer, what would their market be? Maybe DeAndre Hunter is getting the full non-taxpayer MLE. I don't even think that's a guarantee, but like, sure. Like, let's just say he's worth 14, 15 million. Okay, well, he's making 25. So that's a minus 10 million in terms of the production or the value of the player compared to the contract. Like, I just think it's a bad situation that the Lakers should not be invested in. And ultimately, in my opinion, if the Lakers were to have him on the roster, like if the two teams swapped, I think it would just be Rui replaces him in the bench role in Cleveland, and he should replace Rui in the bench role in LA. He's not, in my opinion, better than Marcus Smart. He should not start over Marcus Smart. He should not start over Jake LaRavia. I think both those guys are better for that fifth starter spot in like what LA needs there. So I am out on the trade, but I'm sure you guys will have opinions on it. With all that said, let's get into the Q&A. Before we do, going to take a quick break for the sponsor of tonight's show, Fanatics Live. I will be back in exactly 1 minute. Like many of you, I grew up collecting basketball cards and Pokemon cards. And so when I had the opportunity to partner with Fanatics Live and rip some cards live for you guys, I cannot think of a more fun and nostalgic activity. Fanatics Live is an awesome way to get in on the fun of ripping sports cards. It's an app where fans buy and rip cards together 24/7 with live on-screen hosts guiding the action. Let's go.
All right, Jovan. Show it to me. Come on.
Okay. Okay. Take another player from Dallas. There you go. First NBA rip, and I land a Cooper Flag card. New users can get a free instant rips pack with a graded card to try it out. Use the link in the description to download the app and join your first stream to get your pack. Thank you to Fanatics Live for sponsoring this video. All right. Appreciate the patience from you guys, and shout out to Fanatics Live. let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Steven. Shout out to Steven. Thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. Hopefully we can build off this going into New York. Safe travels home. P.S. Sent you an email about journalism a while ago. If you could check it out. Awesome. I will check it out. I'm not traveling home for a while. I'm not going to be going back till Wednesday. I planned that out appropriately. So, of course, that means that there's a chance the Lakers make a move on Wednesday. But yeah, I think like there will certainly be an adjustment competition wise for the Lakers. And sometimes we see this with them when they play a bad team, when they play a good team, like right after, there's a little bit of that. Oh yeah, this team is not giving us everything we want on both sides of the ball. But yeah, I mean, like entering the Cleveland game, they had won 4 of 5. So now they've won 5 of 7. They are trending in the right direction in general, but they do have to show that they can beat the best teams in the league. I know New York isn't having like the best season compared to expectations, but they are still a good team. I still believe they are one of the biggest threats in the East. And I would still have them as a top 7 team overall. So if LA can beat them in New York, I think that's a really quality win, especially if Austin does not play or if he's coming off the bench on a minutes restriction. Like either way, that's a really solid win. So yeah, I'm interested to see how LA comes out on Sunday. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. Luka back in MVP form plus AR returning. With 1 or 2 good trades, our championship odds look more optimistic. Rob cannot stand pat. 0 trades is punting the season. I agree. And I think we also have to look at, like, I think Houston suffered a big blow with losing Steven Adams. And Houston is a team that pre-Steven Adams trade, I had ahead of the Lakers. And now you could argue, like, we'll see what happens with Houston. They have some assets and some picks, some young players, some contracts to move if they so choose. Maybe they go out and get a center and replace Steven Adams, and that stabilizes their ceiling and floor a bit. But if they don't replace Steven Adams and the replacement is Clint Capella or small ball, I think Houston, like he was a huge part of their identity and what made them so tough and nasty, and the offensive rebounding and just their paint dominance, like that, like he was a huge part of that, right? So losing him like cannot be like overstated. I just think it's a significant blow. So that changes Houston's trajectory, in my opinion. I do think the Lakers have a ways to go to catch up to OKC, Denver, and San Antonio. I think those are the locked in top 3 teams in the West and arguably the league right now. Maybe you could debate Detroit versus San Antonio for number 3, but I think more so OKC and Denver are on their own tier. And then San Antonio, I mean, I thought that comeback win against Houston was impressive, and they just have passed a lot of the tests so far and done so, frankly, with a lot of injuries. Wemby coming off the bench, being on minutes restriction for parts of that. So San Antonio is going to have to go through their lumps as a young team. But yeah, I mean, but like I say all that to say, I think the Lakers have a shot to, with the right move or two, at least get more into that conversation and ascend past the Houston, Minnesota tier. I right now have the Lakers with Houston and Minnesota in a tier where you could argue who's 4th, 5th, or 6th. But I think LA can ascend into at least maybe the San Antonio conversation, and then you're potentially a top 4 team in the league and see what happens in the playoffs. Andrew H., thank you for the super chat. Do you think the Hunter rumors are true or smokescreen? So I'll say there's a false dichotomy here in which, like, I don't think one or the other is necessarily like entirely true, right? Like I mean, I guess something is technically true or smokescreen. So I do say true to a degree. I believe there have been conversations. I believe there has been a framework discussed, but I'm skeptical in the way that this has played out. And maybe it was trending in a certain direction, and then with how it's played out, that has veered. Like, I can't see the Lakers being, again, with the way the reporting has played out and some of this has leaked, I can't see the Lakers being thrilled with that and just with how they like to operate and how they like to control the information and the like the baking of the trade, right? Like the process of getting to the finish line with the trade. The Lakers trades don't leak, right? So it does, like, and then I also think about the last 2 years, and it's like anytime a Lakers transaction has leaked, it often does not happen. Like I can't, again, like I mentioned Westbrook and DFS, there being like a little bit of buzz, but nowhere near the amount of buzz that this Hunter situation has had. And when I think back on all of the almost moves that happened with the Lakers, including like, I mean, you guys saw the recent thing with Bruce Brown talking about that there was a moment he thought he was going to the Lakers before Indiana entered the mix. And like, that's what I reported at The Athletic, because I had someone who was in the war room telling me like, we're getting Bruce Brown. And I didn't frame it in that like direct of a manner, but it was like, Bruce Brown has agreed to be a Laker. And then it ended up shifting at I mean, this is how things go, but like not even the 11th hour, like really the 11th hour and 59th minute, that all of a sudden Indiana swooped in with their mega offer and it was just too good to pass up. Then you had the Miles Turner situation with Westbrook going into the 2022-23 season, where that, I reported on that with Shams, like that was really far along and that ended up not, falling through, but it got to the ownership level in terms of discussing the trade, and pretty much a framework was close to agreed upon, and then they backed out at the last second. So there's been like stuff that has come out or I've been reporting on or other people have reported on, but when it's like that much out before the move, it usually does not happen with the Lakers. So I think there's truth to it. I think there have been discussions. I think there's even been a framework discussed. I'm leaning more towards smokescreen or it ultimately not happening, though, just because, again, I think if you look at how the Lakers operate, this is not how their moves tend to go down. Easy peasy. Excuse me, my chair's creaky. Easy peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Money that'll make team blink on Watson or Kessler. Well, with Denver, I mean, almost anything's going to make them blink because they're going to be a tough situation financially, and they're probably going to have to, like, I think they're heading toward a situation where they probably have to decide on Watson versus Cam Johnson versus Christian Brown. If it were up to me, I think I would probably flip Johnson, but I don't think I would flip it. I've said this before. I said this on Lakers Collective. I think Denver's the second best team in the NBA. I think they have a real shot to beat OKC. I think they have a real shot to win the championship. And I don't think you make a future move to clear your cap sheet at the expense of a championship opportunity. Like, if Denver wins the championship this year and ends up flipping, I mean, then you're in a tough situation because you have, like, it's tough to lose a Cam Johnson if he was a part of a championship run. But let's just say you even have to do that. If they never win a championship again, I think Denver fans would take winning the title this year and eventually losing Cam Johnson and never winning again, versus like trading him now and then being like, well, there's no guarantee you ever get back to being as good as they potentially are this season. And a big reason has been the emergence of Watson. Like, no one knew Watson was this good. Like, any Denver fans did not know Watson was this good, right? Like, they were higher on him than the consensus, but like, Watson has had a breakout season, and that has changed Denver's trajectory, where it went from them being like a great starting five together and then like a solid bench, certainly a better bench than they've had in the Jokic era, to now it's like with Watson's emergence and Jones's emergence, and Pickett has had some flashes. Valanciunas has been a steadying presence off the bench as a backup five, and Tim Hardaway and Bruce Brown are wild cards. Like, all of a sudden they have a pretty strong bench that was not really necessarily as strong or perceived to be as strong going to the season. So with Watson, I think it's, I mean, probably anything in the 20s, I think puts a real difficult decision on Denver's desk in terms of what they're going to do with their core and how they're going to shape that. With Kessler, I would assume the same thing. I think it's got to start at 20 plus million, if not 25 plus million. But I would say for both teams, like restricted free agency is a significant home court advantage typically, where teams are scared off, because I've seen some people float in the chat before when we have these discussions of like, well, why don't you just sign Watson to a contract or sign Kessler to a contract? The issue is if they do sign the offer sheet, they have a few days to match. And during that time, like if we go back to this past free agency, basically all of the action happened through day 3. Like there was not, by day 3, basically everybody has signed. There's always like, there was the restricted free agent holdouts that took forever. And, there's the Kuminga situation. And like, there were some situations that lingered past the first few days, but pretty much all the action happens. And it is a game of musical chairs where if you don't sign somebody, they're not going to wait forever. They're going to go sign somewhere else. So there's a scenario in which the Lakers sign one of these guys, their respective teams wait out the few days and the Lakers get them. There's also a scenario in which they wait out the few days intentionally, screw the Lakers over, match the contract, and now the Lakers are stuck with their pants down on day 4 of free agency, and they lost out on pretty much all of the restricted free agents, pretty much all of the unrestricted free agents, and now they're scrambling to like re-sign player X that maybe they weren't going to re-sign, or now they have to maybe let's just say DA and Marcus both opt out. Now you're maybe just running it back, and it's like Rui and DA and Marcus, and like that's kind of your best option at that point, is signing those guys to maybe like a 1+1 deal and then figuring it out in 2027. So you got to be careful with how you do that, and that's why teams are so reluctant to make those offer sheets. But I think with both guys, with Denver, it's probably starting off in the 20s, just because that probably will trigger a trade. And they're probably gonna have to make a trade anyway to keep Watson. So I think they're factoring that in. With Kessler, I think it's also, they'll at least blink a little bit in the low 20s, but I think you can make a case 20 to 25 million easily for Kessler. Xavier asks, which Lakers survive the trade deadline? It's a good question. I will say, if we pull up, well, Luka, Austin, I'll give you my like 100%. I just don't see these guys being traded. And of course, that means there's a chance one of these guys gets traded. But Luka, Austin, LeBron, I will say Marcus, I will say Jake, I will say Jackson. That's 6 players. I'll say Vando. That's 7. I'll say Bronny. I'm not going to say Adu. So I'll say 8 of the 14. I am like 99% confident won't be traded. The guys I think that are in the mix that I did not name are DeAndre, Rui, Dalton, Gabe, and Maxey. I think I'm missing somebody here. And Adu. Lesser chance of trading Adu, but I think for a certain deal, like if it comes down to it for Herb Jones, I think the Lakers are going to put Adu. If it comes down to it for Nick Claxton, I think the Lakers will put Adu, but we'll see. So yeah, I would say 8 guys are pretty safe. And then the other 6 guys, like I would say DA and Rui are relatively safe. I just don't think there's a 1% chance they're traded. I think it's higher than that. I would look at, as has been the case basically all season, Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton are the 3 most likely players to be traded. Gabe and Maxey just are not rotation caliber players for what the Lakers need. And then the Dalton situation, the writing's on the wall. It's run its course. Kale Calixican. I butchered that. I'm sorry. Thank you for Soup Chat. If it's wing versus big at the deadline, I'm keeping Ayton. His floor is rough, but if this season's a long shot, his ceiling matters. Hearing anything new? I'm with you, though with some through the lens of if it's similar wing and big, right? So if it's Nick Claxton versus Sadiq Bey, I think those players are on two different tiers. If it's Herb Jones or Andrew Wiggins versus Nick Claxton, okay, I think those guys are on relatively similar tiers. If it's Day'Ron Sharp versus Sadiq Bey, if it's even if it's Day'Ron Sharp versus like DeAndre Hunter, I think like those guys are in like the general same vicinity of tier and how I would rank them. Misi is another guy in that mix. So it's like in general, if they're relatively close, I do agree that I would err on the side of the wing versus the big. But if we're talking just like wing versus big in a vacuum, I do think that there needs to be the context of like, if it is a better big versus a middling wing, I would still take the better big. But in general, I'm with you. And I would also be open to them just adding another set. Like, even if it is keeping Ayton and just adding a Sharp or adding a Misi, like adding someone who makes it more of a competition. And if it does, like, because if I'll say this, like if DA plays like the way he played the past month for the next month, then I think you do need a real conversation there of like, is this the best option to start? Is this the best option to be playing 24 plus minutes? Because again, the floor has been very low over the past month. And I would argue almost past 2 months going back to like early December. But in general, yeah, I mean, I think Ayton is probably closer to what they need from the center spot than any of the wings on this team are, because like the more of a sample size we have, they don't really have a 3 on the roster. Like I would argue Marcus is probably more of a 2.5. Jake's probably more of a 3.5, 4. Rui's a 4. LeBron's a 4. I think Luka's a 4 defensively. Luka's like a 3.5 or 4, depending on how, like Vando, I guess. But even Vando, I think either guards down better where he can envelop people with his wingspan, or he's actually guarded up pretty well. And we've seen him, like I think about Jokic when he guarded him, and just he's actually fared well against bigs and just like that physicality and tenacity. So the 3 spot is still a glaring weakness on this roster, and something that I think they could address. And nothing new. It's been quiet, but that's how, like, again, I just here to not have high expectations. That's generally what I've heard, but that could be its own smokescreen. So we shall see. Mac, thank you for the super chat. Why won't the Lakers pursue Keon Ellis for Connect and a pick? Wouldn't he be a good play in the rotation for a defensive upgrade over Gabe Vincent? I think if the Lakers, so when the thing we have to specify here is, what do you mean by and a pick? Because if the Lakers could get Keon Ellis for Dalton and a second, I think they would have done that trade weeks ago. The issue is they're demanding a first round pick for Keon Ellis. And for as much as I like Keon Ellis, I think if the Lakers had, and this is where we could also get into the whole, does LA flip their 2031 for multiple firsts? And then that gives them more flexibility to potentially build out the roster. Because if the Lakers had 4 or 5 firsts at their disposal, I think that puts them in the mix for Giannis. But let's just say, Giannis gets traded elsewhere, or Giannis says he doesn't want to go to the Lakers, whatever, they don't really have a chance. I'd be more open to potentially trading for Keon Ellis. Like, I think with a pick, like, I think you could justify him being worth a first. I think it's a bit of a stretch, and I think it's a really optimistic assessment of him and his game, but that is like what Sacramento's asking for. And I don't think it's like as ridiculous as New Orleans asking for 4 firsts for Herb Jones, right? Like that's way more ridiculous than Sacramento asking for a first for Keon, in my opinion. But if it was 1 second, I think he'd be a Laker right now. The issue is it's not 1 second. It's more than a second. So the Lakers have, I think, one of three options, which is either put the first on the table, find a creative way to get multiple seconds, and then potentially offer 2 or 3 seconds for him, or you're just not getting Keon Ellis. Like those are your three options right now. But I agree. I think he's better than Gabe. I think he would play above Gabe. I think he'd be in the top 9. And I think he'd be a really nice addition. Nabila, thank you for the super chat. I don't think that trade happens, but we might have to lose Rui if we're going to get anything valuable. I don't know if Max, DK, Gabe is enough to upgrade our team. Fair point here. I think it really depends on what, because let's take the Cleveland hypothetical as an example, right? I think the appeal from the Cleveland side is twofold. One, you get off the DeAndre Hunter money. And a whole other thing with this is like the Cavs traded for DeAndre Hunter to play the role that the Lakers theoretically would be acquiring him to play. And they deemed that he was not good enough and they moved him to the bench. And it's like, so then why would the Lakers trade for DeAndre Hunter to try to play that role with the Lakers when at least with Cleveland, you had Jared Allen and Evan Mobley as your 4 or 5 defensively. The Lakers have DeAndre Ayton and LeBron James. Like it's just not close in terms of the defensive front court and sort of the infrastructure that Cleveland has compared to LA. So it's like, if he couldn't fit next to Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, why is he going to fit next to LeBron and DA and basically be another version of the Rui issue with the starting group? This just doesn't make sense to me. But from Cleveland's side, they're getting off the money. But then the other thing is, in getting Rui, you get to remain competitive because, again, Rui and DeAndre Hunter are relatively comparable. Like, I think that they're pretty, if you're doing like a ranking all 450 players or whatever's the ultimate total, I think those guys would be pretty close. I think they'd be within, at least within 20 spots, if not within like 10 to 15 spots. And I hear the arguments for both sides. Like you can make a case either direction, but those guys are relatively similar. And so from Cleveland's side, you get to just plug in Rui in the DeAndre Hunter role. He can have halves like DeAndre Hunter had against the Lakers in that second half where he hit multiple threes, had a couple nice drives. Like Rui can do that for Cleveland off the bench. And then you also have the flexibility in the summer to continue to build out your roster, make a decision on Rui. The Lakers, you'd be losing that flexibility, obviously, and you'd be locked into Hunter. But to your point here, this is where the context of the situation matters, because if the Lakers are potentially trading with, say, Brooklyn's not looking to win now. Brooklyn's not necessarily looking for Rui to help them. So there's not necessarily a difference in them acquiring Rui versus, say, Maxey or Gabe. Expiring money is expiring money to them. Doesn't really matter. Where a team like Cleveland, it does matter because Cleveland still has ambitions to contend for the conference finals or finals. And you could argue replacing DeAndre Hunter and with Rui, it's a lateral move, or maybe it's even an upgrade, right? So it really depends on the team that the Lakers are trading with and what their ambitions are. I think if a team is looking to get off money, it doesn't really matter, right? You're getting expiring contracts. If you're trying to remain competitive, then it matters. And then it's not close between Maxey and Gabe and Rui. Obviously, Rui is the most attractive asset among those three. And I would even throw Dalton into that as probably the third most attractive asset, just from like a pure on court right now. And maybe it's close between Dalton and Gabe, but so I'm with you. Like I think it really just depends on the context of the situation. If we think about some of the teams that the Lakers, like if you go through the list that the LA Times reported, like Dallas with Najee Marshall, Dallas is supposed to be tanking right now, and that's the way that's trending. So for them, it might not matter. Now there's also the whole thing with would they trade with the Lakers, which I'm skeptical of, but Dallas doesn't matter. New Orleans is a team that is like trying to be competitive in the sense of I think they want to like establish a culture and they want to have a little bit of momentum going to next season, but it is in their best interest to obviously sort through the future with that group. That's also a counterpoint to trading Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, but I think like Dalton would be someone that probably has some value to them, but I don't know how they would feel about Rui versus Gabe versus Maxey. Cleveland we already discussed. Then there is Sacramento. I think they should be rebuilding, but you never know with Sacramento. So I'm not going to pretend like I could see them liking Rui and being like, oh, this guy's better than Gabe or Maxey. We want that guy. So it really just depends on like, again, the context of the trade. And it's hard to say in a vacuum, but I do agree in general with you with the premise that no one is trading for Maxey or Dalton or Gabe to help their team this year, because those guys are not going to help your team this year. They are going to likely make your team worse, especially if the Lakers are trading those guys plus assets for something. That means you're giving up the better player, the better contract, whatever. So yeah, I'm with you. Like if the Lakers are making a bigger move, they have to give up something, right? I don't see a like this big monumental season changing, needle moving trade happening with Maxey, Gabe, Dalton, and a second. If they're not putting Rui or the first on the table, it's really hard to find a difference maker. Harry Chinati, thank you for the super chat. Good game from DA equals win. It is really that simple. The issue is those have been few and far between lately. And I mean, we could go through. I don't think Cleveland was a good game. I don't think Chicago was a good game. I mean, they have won in spite of him not playing well, but I actually think in those cases they've won because they benched him, as I've discussed, where Denver game leaves early with an injury, Clippers game gets benched, Dallas game gets benched, Chicago game gets benched. And then Cleveland, I mean, that was just an overall nightmare. But in 3 of their past 4 wins, he was benched in the second half and or fourth quarter. So that has, and they visibly and statistically performed much better after he got benched. So yeah, I mean, that is the winning formula. The problem is it's not really been a reliable formula lately. And that's something that needs to change ASAP. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Realistically, if we could get Claxton, he might be our 3rd best perimeter defender. My only concern would be his rebounding. Him and Hayes long term is small. Fair point. I agree. I think, yeah, I think you're probably right. Like I would put Smart and Vando ahead of him. And then once you get into the Jake range, I think you can make a case Claxton is a better perimeter defender than him. Like that's one of the, it's funny because I feel like people will compare Claxton to Hayes in like a negative sense and be like, well, he's just a better Jackson. And it's like, well, one, he's a much better Jackson. Like he is better. I would say Jackson's probably the best lob threat in the league, or at least in that conversation, right? Like that is his. Most role players have like their one skill that they are elite at, and then you just have to be decent at a few other things. Jackson's catch radius, the hands, the athleticism, the verticality, like I mean, he's about to be in the dunk contest. Like we saw the East Bay dunk, like in game, he's done that a couple times. Like Jackson is an elite athlete with an elite catch radius, and he is on the short list of best dunking big men, best lob big men in the league, right? So Jackson, that is his superpower. But Claxton is very good in that regard in his own right. But outside of that, Claxton has got a floater. Claxton has got some DHO and passing to him. He, I would say, is similar level of screener and just roller to Jackson. He's a better rebounder. He's a much better defender. He's more versatile as a switching piece, but he's also a better rim protector. So does not foul as much as Jackson. Like I think people comparing that, like, I mean, I get the apprehension to a degree, but I'm also like, I mean, Jackson, like straight up, I think is a better fit with Luka, and Jackson's player archetype is a better fit with Luka. That's why we've seen those two have the chemistry that they've had and just like the natural partnership there. If you're adding a better version of that, like that sounds pretty good to me. I think Claxton could do a lot of what Lively did with Luka. I think Claxton could do a lot of what Jackson did with Luka. And then you could also argue, I think Lively's a better rim protector, but I think Claxton's more switchable and a better perimeter defender. So like, yeah, I mean, and Lively's a better rebounder overall. So like Lively's more of like a true center, I would say, compared to Claxton, but I don't think you're getting Lively. He's obviously, dealing with his recovery right now, but I really like Claxton. I've really liked Claxton going back to last year. To your point on the rebounding, it is a bit of a concern. The rebounding has dipped the last couple of years, and it's hard to set. Like, they've been so bad and dysfunctional on the court, just not a good team, that it's hard to separate them being more competitive and him being a better rebounder with some of the recent dip. But I mean, if it really comes down to it, and you have those two as your centers, then I think you have to think about adding a third center, and I think Jackson becoming more situational, because I believe you favor, like, this is the whole thing with when we talk about the starters or whatnot, and we talk about, well, this player's defense limitations, this player's, and it's like, well, what about Luka? What about Austin? It's like, well, Luka and Austin are dropping 30 points and 8+ assists every single night. So when role player X goes out and does that, then they can take some plays off defensively. If they're not, then they need to bust their ass and be a high motor player. And it's kind of the same thing here, where if you have to pick between the $25 million center, who's just a better overall player by a notable margin, Jackson either has to get better at some of his weaknesses, or you need a different option there as a backup. I don't think Jackson's going anywhere. I think the Slovenian citizenship is going to earn him some, probably a permanent role on the Lakers. He might turn into their Dwight Powell, but I would say in that case, like, I'd want to look for a different backup option, at least as like a brawnier, bigger option that can complement Claxton better. All right, I'm going to be meeting up with my brother after this stream, so I'm going to go about 10-15 more minutes. Tommy Gold says we need to overpay for Watson in the offseason. I agree. I mean, it depends on what the figure is. It might not even be an overpay. Like, Watson, I think, is looking easily like a $20+ million player with the production he had when Jokic was out. Now, I think there's a question of, and it's funny that he's on Denver, and there's sort of this Denver crossroads that he's at, in terms of, does he want to go the Jeremy Grant route, or does he want to go the Aaron Gordon route? Right. So the Jeremy Grant route was, Jeremy Grant was growing into kind of similar to Peyton Watson. Honestly, I think there's more similarities between those two than Gordon. But Jeremy Grant wanted his own team. Jeremy Grant wanted to be an all-star. Jeremy Grant wanted the big contract, and he ended up getting it. But I think, to be completely frank about it, like, he sort of wasted his career. And I think, had he gone a different route, instead of going to Detroit and then eventually Portland, I think he could have been a big piece as, like, probably the fourth best player on a great team. But that was not the way that he wanted to go. Whereas Aaron Gordon was the man in Orlando and had his growing pains there, and was, like, clearly not the number one option. I think another guy similar to this was like Andre Iguodala, but was like in the all-star mix, was like a really, really good player. You just knew if that was your best or even second best player, you probably had a capped ceiling. Aaron Gordon embraces this new role in Denver and becomes one of the best third options in the league. I think was looking like a potential all-star earlier in the season before he got injured. And he's just been awesome in that role. So I think Peyton Watson has to make a decision with his career of which way does he want to go? Does he want to be Jeremy Grant and go ball out on a lottery team, but just kind of go nowhere? And I think underachieve in terms of like Jeremy Grant, of course, made a lot of money and he's put up some big numbers, but I think there was a different version of his career where he was, again, the third or fourth option on a really good team, and he was more of a complementary piece rather than trying to be the guy or like the number two guy. Similar thing with Aaron Gordon. So we'll see with Peyton Watson. Like on the Lakers, clearly he would be at best the number 3, but I think ideally the number 4. And if he's cool with that, I think he makes a lot of sense. If he's not, then that's a whole other. But he's a LA native, grew up a Lakers fan, so went to UCLA. I think he's going to be on board with being in LA if that opportunity presents itself. Isabel says, can't send a super chat, but I'm worried we'll get killed inside with a Claxton Hayes rotation. I do think that if you go with Claxton, you probably want a bigger 4 in terms of like, speaking of Aaron Gordon, I think Aaron Gordon would be a great fit next to a Claxton or someone who has a certain amount of strength, is a certain caliber of rebounder. You do need to shift your team a little bit toward that direction. I think it helps that Luka is a great rebounder. I mean, great rebounder for a point guard, but even for a wing, if you want to, and I've classified him as a wing, more of a wing defensively. For a wing, Luka's a great rebounder, right? Like Luka's just a really, really good rebounder. He's arguably the best. I would say the best rebounder on the team. So that helps. And then Austin's also a good rebounder for a guard. That helps as well. But you do need a certain amount of rebounding and motor from your 3 and 4 spot, I think, to like, it might be a situation where you don't necessarily have anybody averaging 10 rebounds per game, but you do have like 4 players averaging between 6 and 8 rebounds per game. And that collectively makes you a good rebounding team. But it does, like, that's where then, okay, we'll bring up, kind of fleshing this out a little bit. That's where, like, if Rui is the starting 4, I have way more concerns because I already have concerns with the Rui, Luka, Austin trio. But then Rui is not a good rebounder. And I think then that puts an immense amount of pressure on the other front court player to be a good rebounder. So this is where roster construction and lineup balance and trying to shore up the weaknesses of certain players is a factor. Now, this is also why when we've had these discussions, like I favor Walker Kessler over Nick Claxton. He doesn't have the same defensive versatility, but he might be a little cheaper now coming off of the shoulder injury. And he is a defense unto himself in terms of he is like the Rudy Gobert protege, and you can funnel your entire defense, or have your entire defense funnel guys into him as a rim protector. He's a great rebounder. He's a great rim protector, and I also think he's more skilled and gifted and talented offensively than Gobert. You look at his finishing numbers. He's got hook shots on both sides. He's got a little bit of a drop step to his game. So Walker Kessler is my dream target. You don't get the versatility of Claxton, but he's a better rebounder, better rim protector, better interior force. And really, I think the only 2 guys that come or that surpass him are Wemby and Gobert, right? But those are, it's Gobert's could win his 5th defensive player of the year this year, and Wemby should be winning his 2nd. So it's like, all right, those 2 guys are in a different stratosphere. But outside of that, I think Kessler is right there with anybody. Isabel says, thanks for reading my comment. Of course, I appreciate the super chat. Kane Carter says, hey, Jovan, hot take, Rui and DA are the same. They need touches to be effective. The moment they don't get fed, they lose interest in the game. You need a high motor 2-way wing and big who don't need touches. I don't disagree. And my, my like pushback or sort of just continuing this point would be, this is the wrong team to be on to need touches to determine your energy and focus. This is not the team for that. And that's why ultimately I think guys like Marcus and Jake and Vando have stood out in a positive way because yes, Vando can miss wide open layups. Vando can not be defended at the 3-point line. Jake can pass up open shots. Jake can pass up an open shot and dribble into traffic and turn the ball over. Marcus can do all the crazy things that Marcus does. He can throw a hit-ahead pass that's not there. He can take a pull-up three in transition. He can look off Luka and try to call his own number. But regardless of what those guys do offensively, they bring a certain level of defense and motor and intensity and tenacity. And you rarely, if ever, have to question, did they bring it tonight defensively? And were they locked in? And yes, there are matchups. There are times Marcus gets blown by. Marcus is in his early 30s. He's dealt with a bunch of injuries. He's not the same player he was 4 years ago. Jake is relatively slow and can struggle with athleticism. Vando can sometimes make head-scratching decisions defensively. He gets a little too trigger happy with going for steals or can get lost off the ball. Like, these things happen with them, but they're still bringing it every single game. They're playing with a level of urgency, and the same cannot be said for most of the rest of the roster, and most of the rest of the roster specifically in terms of the supporting cast. And so if you need the ball to play hard, this is the wrong team for you, and you should be on a different team. That just is what it is. This is not the team to, like, every non-star on this team needs to play hard, regardless of if you're getting 3 shots or 7 shots. And that might sound a little harsh, but like that is the way to maximize this group and to support the deficiencies, in particular of Luka and Austin moving forward, is give them length, size, athleticism, motor, and then I think that is a championship formula. But yeah, I agree. I think the Lakers, I think they need 2 high motor wings or 2-way wings that fit next to Luka and Austin. And then I think they need a big man who does not like that. That's where, like, if DA had Jackson's mentality, that would, like, just totally different player and totally different, I think, ceiling for this group. But it's a different mentality. Stephen Lee, Jovan, what's your early prediction on who's in and who's out once the trade deadline passes? So are we talking Lakers, or are we talking just like general predictions around the league? With Lakers, someone asked me earlier who's going to be on the roster. So I said I think there are 8 guys I am fairly certain are close to locks, which those 8 guys would be Luka, Austin, LeBron, Marcus, Jake, Vando, Adu, and Bronny. I think those 8 guys are all going to be on the team. To a lesser degree, I would put DeAndre and Rui and Adu. Like, let's say those 8 guys are tier 1. Tier 2 for me is DeAndre, Rui, and Adu. I think it's unlikely those guys are traded, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they are. I think it would, like, if the Lakers get the center of the future, I think DeAndre is expendable. If the Lakers get the wing of the future, I think Rui's expendable. With Adu, if it's just, again, if New Orleans gets off the price of 4 first-round picks for Herb Jones and it comes down to we want Rui a first and Adu, I think the Lakers would strongly consider that and have to pull the trigger on that. So it just depends on, like, those guys I think are unlikely to be traded, to be clear. It's just they're not, I don't want to say untouchable because some of the other guys are not like untouchable, but it's just unlikely that they're traded. And then the 3 guys who are the most likely to be traded easily are Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton. Gabe and Maxey because they don't fit within the rotation and they're expiring contracts. Dalton also doesn't fit within the rotation, and the Lakers already traded him. His trade value has tanked. He clearly is not a part of the future. He does not fit what the Lakers are trying to do, and it's time for both sides to move on. So if I would say that at least one of those 3 is gone. It's tough for me to state with any confidence that 2 of the 3 or all 3 are going to be gone. But I mean, I guess if I was doing like the line, I think like Dalton's the most likely to be gone in my opinion, but that's because among those three, I think he has the most value in terms of just someone will talk. Like this always happens in the NBA. Someone talks themselves into a young player still on a rookie scale contract. So the fact that Dalton has an extra year, I think some team will go to YouTube, watch that 37-point performance against Utah and be like, all right, we need this guy in our program. Gabe and Maxey, it's like, they're going to watch my video clip on X and be like, all right, we're good on Gabe. It's just not, you're not doing that to improve your team. So, yeah. Walter White, Jovan, is it possible the Cavs are sending a first for Rui and DK, then Lakers have 2 firsts for Herb or someone else? It's possible. I would say it's highly unlikely. I think it would more realistically be a second or 2 seconds. If it's a first, that changes the conversation. And I still don't love taking on the 25 million, but if you could tell me that the Lakers are then going to either use that first to go get Giannis, to go get another high impact player next summer, or to potentially go get Herb or someone else at this deadline, then that changes how I view it. But it's very context dependent on what is the follow-up move, right? Because I like pick accumulation is great, but the Lakers need to be in building mode right now. Like that's one thing I feel like keeps getting lost in all this is like Luka's about to be 27 and that is still very young. If you look at most historic rates, they hit their prime typically around 28, 29. Like that's typically their peak season. So Luka's not even there yet. He's still a year or two away from hit. And again, there's always exceptions. Guys could peak later, guys could peak earlier, whatever. But based on the trajectory Luka is on and the guys that have come before him, the average age or so is typically around like 29. So if we're operating under the assumption Luka's got a couple more years to reach like peak Luka, you need to be building to have the right infrastructure, have the right roster in place, and likely also have some continuity. You don't want to just be throwing the roster together like the Lakers like to do right before that offseason going into the season. Like you ideally want a year or two under your belt with that group. So that means starting the process right now, continuing the process in the offseason, and then also continuing the process next season. And if you look at the next 3 trade cycles as we're going to get a piece or two this trade cycle, we're going to restructure the roster next summer, then we're also maybe going to add a piece or two next season. That's how going into like 2027, 28, you have a level of continuity. You have a growing sample size with Austin and Luka together. You've ideally added 3 to 4 notable core pieces onto the roster, and like you're building something. And then that 2027, 28 season, you are ready to really win a title, be in that top next to whoever's up, presumably OKC and San Antonio, but like who knows at that point. So I think that's the goal for the Lakers is they need to be building towards that, and getting the pick is nice because it can help with that. But I want to know what else is out there. Because again, there's a real opportunity cost to taking on Hunter and adding that 25 million. Encom Hoodie, thank you for the super chat. We're 2 down on DeAndre Hunter. I agree the idea of Hunter is better than the player, but he somewhat fits the 3D mold. If he doesn't work, use his expiring contract for a trade this offseason. So, I mean, to your point, you could potentially flip him, but I would also point to the Lakers had expiring money last summer that they didn't trade. They had expiring money in Malik Beasley and Mo Bamba that they didn't trade. So you could argue like the proper course of action post a transaction like this would be to flip the player in the summer. The Lakers have not done that. The Lakers have not shown an ability to do that. So part of that to me is sort of wish casting onto the front office that they're going to do something that they've not done before. And again, maybe they prove me wrong. Maybe this happens and then they ultimately flip him, but they have not shown an ability to execute selling off their expiring contracts, at least going back to like the Russ trade. So, and that's going on 3 years now. there was D'Lo, but they also flipped D'Lo for DFS, who wasn't expiring as well. So that I view that a little bit differently. It wasn't like an expiring for. He had a player option, but he was likely going to opt out. So, point being, like, the Lakers have not really capitalized on their expiring money. So I don't want to assume that they're just magically going to start doing that right now. But the point I'm going to disagree with here is I'm going to disagree with the D part of this, the defense part, because, like, DeAndre Hunter, okay, this year, career worst shooting percentage, 31% on threes. You go back last year, 41%, 39% in Atlanta, 43% in Cleveland. And what's notable here is he actually was attempting more threes than Rui. He was attempting 6 threes per game, 7 in Atlanta, 5 in Cleveland. But that's higher than Rui, who's typically in that 4 to 4.5 range. So, like, if there's one thing to nitpick with Rui shooting, it is on relatively low volume compared to some of the other top shooters in the league. DeAndre Hunter, you could go back to last season. I'd rather take the guy shooting 41% on 6 attempts than like 43% on 4 attempts, right? So you could argue DeAndre Hunter is one season removed from an elite shooting season going back to last year. Year before that, 39% on 5 threes. That's also really good. Year before that, 35, then 38. Then earlier in his career was not as good of a shooter, really broke out year 3 as a shooter. So you could talk me into DeAndre bouncing back. And, like, if you look at, there's Crane just did a comparison of Rui versus DeAndre and some of their B-ball index metrics. And from a shot quality perspective, there's a giant gap between the shot quality Rui's getting versus the shot quality DeAndre Hunter is getting. So you give DeAndre Hunter Rui's shot quality. I don't think it's the same. I still think there's a gap there, but could DeAndre get back to being a mid-30s or even high 30s three-point shooter? I think that's possible. The part where it's not there is the defense. I just, in watching film on him, I just don't see it. And looking at his defensive metrics, I don't see it. He is rated out as a below average defender every year. In the B-ball index grades of grading him in his defensive role, he's graded out as an F the last few years. So that's where I will push back a little bit here. I can see that the counterpoint to, like, Hunter being in the Lakers system playing better. I don't think you're going to magically make him into a player that he's not. And I would say that if you just swap him and Rui, again, I do think he's a better defender than Rui. I think it's relatively close, but, like, I do think he's a better defender, but he still, to me, is at best the Lakers' 4th best perimeter defender. He's not better than Marcus. He's not better than Vando, and he's not better than Jake. And I would say there's and even, like, Jake is obviously not as good as Marcus and Vando. I think those two are close. Then there's a gap to Jake. Then I think there's another gap to DeAndre, and that's kind of being optimistic. I think he's closer to, I'll say, I think he's closer to, like, Gabe Vincent, Austin Reaves defensively, but he does have the 6'8" frame. So, like, he's not going to be as harmful as those guys getting picked on with their size. But I think he's closer to that side of the spectrum than he is the Marcus Vando side of the spectrum. So that's just, like, I think the defense is a little bit of wish casting of who people look at the frame and they're like, oh, he can do this or that. But, like, he doesn't actually do that. If you look at the numbers, watch the film, he's not that guy. So I think there's a little bit of wish casting of that. And Come Hoodie follows up. He says, I did say somewhat. That's true. But here's the thing. And that's fair. I'm not even, I'm not trying to go at you. I think the bigger thing, again, if he was an expiring contract and it was just like, let's say there's an alternate universe here where he's an expiring contract and Cleveland's just, like, saving a little bit of money in this scenario, and the luxury tax hit for Cleveland is, like, giant, so they're able to save some money, and it's a 1-year thing. Okay, you could talk me into that. You could, if it's a 1-year thing, I'm more open to it. The issue is, if DeAndre Hunter is making $25 million next year on the Lakers cap sheet, he's going to probably be their 3rd or 4th highest paid player. And if you're structuring your roster with DeAndre Hunter being your 3rd or 4th highest paid player, that's a concern. And I think that's a really limited roster. So that's more so like at that point, you're maybe re-signing Austin, you're having DeAndre Hunter, and then you're either using your cap space or using your exceptions, like re-signing some guys with bird rights. You're basically running back the same roster, maybe with like one addition with an exception. And if you just told me you're running back this year's roster, also minus LeBron probably, if you just lose LeBron and replace him, you lose LeBron and Rui and replace them with like DeAndre Hunter and a non-taxpayer MLE guy, I think you're arguably worse than this year's roster. So that's the challenge for LA. That's why I just don't, I'm out on it. Okay, I see there's some other super chats here. Gonna do, well, sorry. Okay, so I'd missed a couple. I want to do these and then I'm going to wrap here. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. DK, Gabe, and Maxi for Miles Turner. If Giannis gets traded, MT could bounce back next to Luka and Braun. The issue with my issue with Miles Turner is, so if you guys think Nick Claxton is a concerning rebounder, I would like to introduce you to Miles Turner. The bigger issue is he's got 3 years left and he's got an ascending contract. So he's making 25.3, 26.5, 27.9, 29.1. I just think it's a little too high for my blood. And based on he's 29, about to be 30 next year, like role-playing bigs in their early 30s, I think sometimes there could be a little bit of a drop-off there. I think he's already dropped off a little bit. I don't think he's quite he had some big moments in Indiana's run. I do want to be clear on that. He was a big part of Indiana making the conference finals, the finals, and having a real shot to win a title, and especially the 3-point shooting was a big thing. And the defense to a degree, but I don't think he's been the same defender the last couple of years. And I also think the rebounding is obviously a limiting factor where I think you have to factor that in even more than you did or you potentially would with Claxton. If that's the price, that one I'm a little bit more open to than DeAndre Hunter, because I think Turner is a starting level center. And Turner could fit with Luka and Austin, whereas Hunter I view more as a bench player. So, like, I guess if I'm gonna pay 25 plus million, I want a starter at least. I don't want a bench player. But you also have to think about Milwaukee's stretch Dame to sign Miles Turner. I think they're gonna want some draft compensation for it. So if now we're talking about the first, that's little, like, you could argue it's fair value for Miles Turner. I think there are other centers I would personally prefer, including Claxton and Walker Kessler, if you're able to swing either one of those. I'm not like entirely out on it. He's not the roller. He's not the roller that you would want. He's not really a deep seal post up mismatch guy either. And he's not the rebounder. So it's just like, I think he doesn't check enough of the boxes of the ideal center, in my opinion, next to Luka. But for this season, to your point, like, he could have a nice close to the season. But then I think about the extra 3 years. For some guys, it's appealing. For some, it depends where you're at in your development curve. If you're early to mid 20s, I want the extra 3 years. If you're late 20s and your 30s, that can give me some pause. Ryan Lucas says, clearly, thank you for super chat, clearly waiting out Giannis, if not Bay or Ellis. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it's going to be, I mean, everyone's waiting out Giannis right now to a degree, right? And what's going to happen here over the next, 6 days and going into the deadline. So that's like in general, but it's also Lakers specific, as I think the Lakers are one of the teams who have at least a shot at Giannis. I think it's going to be really tough to pull it off in the next 6 days, but if it extends into the summer, I think the Lakers become real players in that instance, especially if they can flip their pick for multiple picks or somehow find a creative way to get more assets, then they become a player in the mix at least. I don't think they're the favorites. I don't even think they're co-favorites, but they're in the mix. If not, Bay, I think Bay or Ellis are two realistic options. I saw Jake Fisher of the Steinline and Bleacher Report say that the two players he's the most confident in being traded by Thursday are Keon Ellis and DeAndre Hunter. We've already talked through Hunter, so I don't want to relitigate that, but it seems like Sacramento's on the outs with Keon Ellis. I don't know why. I think he should be one of their building blocks. He should be like a 30-plus minute a night starter for them. I don't get what Sacramento is doing, but you could say that for the past 20 years. With Bay, I like Bay. To me is more of a like if it's a Gabe or Maxi plus something for Bay, I like that. I do not think Bay is the missing fifth starter. I would still start Marcus Smart over him. I don't think he's quite good enough defensively, especially against backcourt players. But I would take both of these guys easily, especially if it ends up being second round price, or maybe LA is able to flip something for multiple seconds, then put some of those seconds for one of these two guys. I would sign up for that. I don't think I'd give up a first for either one of these guys. And Ellis, to me, is more of a, you could talk me into him over Marcus. I think I'd like to see it first before I go that far, because at least he's a good backcourt defender, and a lot of his defensive metrics are elite. With Bay, to me, he kind of fits in that same like Rui, Luka, LeBron, Jake, more of a 3.5 or 4, and the Lakers have enough of those guys. So I think to me, he's more of a bench guy. Okay, I got a couple more super chats here. Musel K 420, thank you for the super chat. Did a 5-team trade. LA turns first into 2 multi-first round. Adu plus first plus second for Peyton Watson. Rui plus Dalton for Hunter plus 2 seconds. DA plus first salary for Claxton. First and second for Misi and Bay. Got to get Musel K in the Lakers front office here to get some action going. He pulled off multiple trades. I'll go one by one and dissect each of these. I don't think the first package is enough for Denver. I think if Denver ends, I don't think Denver is going to make a sell off trade. If they were, I think it would be Cam Johnson and not Peyton Watson. I think Peyton Watson is going to be their 3 of the future, or 3 or 4, depending on the trajectory of Aaron Gordon's career, but I still think Aaron Gordon's a really good player. So I think Peyton Watson is going to be someone that they prioritize and don't trade. And honestly, I think if they made him available, they could probably get more than that for him. Rui and Dalton for Hunter in 2 seconds, I think is a reasonable trade package in terms of just pure value. I've already been on record why I would not trade for Hunter and my apprehension with that. But if you are making that trade, I think that's a pretty fair trade framework. DA plus first plus salary for Claxton. Let's see. You still have Gabe and you still have Maxi here. So you could make that work. And I think that could be I think Claxton's going to cost the first. So I think that is reasonable if Brooklyn's really open to moving him. And then first and second for Misi and Bay. I don't love. Well, so I guess you traded a first for 3 firsts, right? Because the Lakers can only trade 1 first right now. So you are trading 3 firsts here. A first in the Peyton trade, a first in the DA trade, a first in the Misi Bay trade. So you would have had to have split the first into 3 firsts, not 2, unless I'm misunderstanding your question. That one, I'm a little less sold on. I like Misi. I like Bay. I'd rather give up multiple seconds for those guys. It does seem like you probably have to give up a first for Misi, so I'm a little bit more borderline on that. But I would say 2 of these for sure, I think are very realistic. I just think the Lakers would have a lot to think about with the Hunter trade. And I think the Brooklyn would have a lot to think about with the Claxton trade. And then I don't see Denver giving up Peyton, especially to the Lakers. And then New Orleans, I think that one's like fair. I might prioritize keeping the first personally, especially if you already have Claxton theoretically in this scenario. I don't know that you necessarily need Misi, though. Of course, having, those two together, like your center spot's set for the foreseeable future. And then last one here from Art and Kim. Thank you for super chat. Luka doesn't find Rui to get up more shots. My one frustration with Luka, the best 3-point shooter, should get the lion's share of threes. It's not Luka. There's certainly some truth to that. And that's also partly where Rui playing less with Luka can affect his shot volume, right? The one thing, like, I also think part of this is honestly a respect to Rui and his gravity, because like Luka will create shots for Jake and Marcus in part because teams are willing to play off of those guys. Teams are not really willing to play off Rui. So that's where I think Rui, part of it is on Luka. Part of it I also think is on the coaching staff with how they sometimes use Rui, where if you just park Rui in the corner, when you are able to generate shots for him, he's getting wide open threes and like he's typically money from the corner. But there's also sometimes teams just won't help off of that. And then that's what leads to lobs or Luka getting downhill. So the thing I would disagree with is I don't think like Luka's actively seeing Rui open and being like, screw the best shooter on our team, I'm not going to pass to him. Like, I don't think that's the case at all. And I think about, especially recently, I think about the Chicago game. I think about the Denver game. Like there's been some games where Rui has been more involved offensively, in part due to Luka involving him more. Now, can Luka do it at a higher level? Yes, I agree. I think part of it's on him. Part of it's on the coaching staff with how they use Rui and running more actions for him, which I think they've done actually more with the bench groups. And we've seen a little bit of Rui next to Luka, Rui next to LeBron, Rui being the number 2 option and Rui being featured more. But I agree with the premise that like they need to feature him more. I think that should be a goal of theirs. At the same time, I just think there's especially with Austin coming back now, like there are a lot of mouths to feed. There is a hierarchy. Rui is probably 5th in the hierarchy behind the big 3 and Ayton. And so like it's just kind of hard to feed everybody every single game. So that's just something that they have to navigate. But I don't disagree with you. Like I think it's a team-wide thing. It's not just a Luka thing. And then final one here from Francis. Thank you for super chat. Lakers get Haywood Highsmith, Herb Jones, Claxton. Nets get Vincent, Kleba, Connect, Misi. Lakers swap in a second. Pelicans get Rui Adu. Lakers first. This is interesting because at first I was like, well, the Nets are not getting a first, so why are the Nets doing this? But they are getting Misi and they're getting Dalton, which, I think you could Frankenstein Misi and Dalton into being around a first round pick. They're also getting a swap in a second. That's an interesting one. From the Lakers side, I would do this, giving up 1 first. You are giving up Rui, but you're giving up 1 first and basically it's Rui in the first and guys who aren't in the rotation for Herb and Claxton. And you're remaking you still have Ayton, so you're going to have to navigate that of moving him to the bench. But Claxton, LeBron, Herb, Austin, Luka, I think that's a championship level starting group. Your depth takes a hit to a degree, but I like Highsmith as a low stakes gamble. I like that. I think Brooklyn might want more, but you could argue Misi like replaces Claxton as sort of their young big of the future, and you see what you have with him. Then Pelicans Pelicans might want more as well for Herb, but I think that's more of a appropriate price for Herb. So yeah, I don't really. I think you could argue Brooklyn and like as of right now, I think Brooklyn and the Pelicans would demand more, but when it actually comes down to making a deal, I think this is more in line with like the realistic values of Claxton and Herb. But appreciate it. I'm going to hang out with my brother now, spend some family time. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to, I was just reading some Sion says that, Jovan, you're my idol. Help me every day. I'm watching you. I appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you. But shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to the chat. I will be back Sunday night after Lakers Knicks. The last time these two teams played on February 1st, there was an earthquake of a trade. We'll see what happens this time. I doubt the Lakers are trading for another Luka. I doubt they're making another trade after that game, but we'll be interested to see how that one goes. But shout out to everybody. And Tally Khalifa asks, how did my fantasy football season end? In my primary league, I finished third in the regular season, lost in the first round. My whole team quit on me other than Puka. Shout out to Puka. Just a disaster first round for me. So I ended up getting fifth. And then other league made it to the I was like a 6 seed, made it to the semifinals, lost on the biggest BS of my fantasy football career of, I think it was the Niners-Panthers game where the Niners got a pick 6. They're already blowing out the Panthers. They got a pick 6 with like a few minutes left. And I lost on that pick 6 because I was going up against the Niners defense and I was in prime position to win. So rough end for my fantasy football season, but I appreciate you guys. Appreciate the question. And I will talk to you all on Sunday.